This year's IPCC report points to the fact that we are adapting to our warming planet. Adaptation used to be a dirty word in environmental circles, but it now appears to be a fact of life. Joining us now for more on the report and its findings, in Edmonton, Alberta, Deborah Davidson. She's a lead author of the IPCC report, also professor of environmental sociology at the University of Alberta. And with us here in studio, Julia Langer, CEO of the Toronto Atmospheric Fund. And Julia, it's nice to have you back here in Toronto. And Deborah, of course, good to have you on the program from out west. I want to just share some facts that you two know all too well with our viewers, and then we'll get into our discussion here. The IPCC report consists of 195 member countries. It is contributed to by 745 authors. There are more than 1,700 expert reviewers, 12,000 references cited, 73,000 published works synthesized. I guess it's pretty thorough. So, Deborah, let's start with you. What was your role in the latest round of IPCC reports?
I was a lead author on Chapter 26, which is the regional chapter on North America. And I also represented our chapter on the author team for the summary for policymakers and the technical summary documents.
And if you had to put it in a nutshell, what would you say the key scientific message you saw coming out of that report to be?
The key scientific message would be, well, it's hard to narrow it down to one, but first and foremost that we are already irrefutably observing the impacts of climate change in all over the world and in many different sectors. And number two, we are starting to see signs of adaptation and starting to see signs of adaptation planning at certain governmental levels. But we certainly have a long ways to go before those adaptation efforts are sufficient to address the number of impacts that we'll be facing over the coming decades.
Okay, we'll follow up on the adaptation message in just a second. Julia, let's get you into this now. To what extent do you think we are feeling the effects of climate change in Canada already?
Oh, I think it's irrefutable. Just look at last year in terms of Toronto flooding, Calgary flooding, just look south of the border, Hurricane Sandy, so the read it and weep message from the IPCC report is that it's happening fast. We are more and more certain about it happening all over the world, including Canada. And but I'd like to jump to the hopeful message right away, because it's also saying that catastrophic climate change can be averted. We are going to experience some, no question. We are already seeing that effect, but if we actually get on the bandwagon and we know what those solutions are, that we can actually avert the catastrophic aspect of this.
Okay, again, more on that in a second. I want to follow up on something you said at the beginning of that. And I'll just play the role of climate skeptic here, okay? We've had hurricanes in the past, we've had floods in the past, we've had tropical storms in the past, and nothing new about that. How do you pluck something out of the headlines that's happening today and say, aha, right, there you go? Yeah, and I think it's all kind of part of the body of evidence. It's not that you can say the flood in Toronto was climate change, the flood in Calgary, but we know that the temperature is warming, that we are having increased melt in the glaciers in the mountains, that we have increased evaporation from the lakes. We have, so the climatic patterns, it's all sort of part of a general change. And so you can't say that, X caused Y, but the trend, and from the 1,200 scientists, or the 700 and so scientists, are saying this is happening, this is caused by human contributions of emissions to the atmosphere, and so we're going to see more of this, and we're already seeing the evidence. So, we are people who live in a city or live in a country, and so we have to take that message for ourselves and use it in a mobilizing, motivating way. So, I don't want to dismiss the Calgary floods and the Toronto floods. I want to sort of take it on board and say, this is a signal for us. Okay, having said that, Deborah Davidson, let me get you back in here. Are there any, I know it's going to sound like an odd question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Are there any upsides to climate change?
I would say there are some redeeming features to climate change. I really hesitate to call them upsides, because I think there will be some suffering, and there already has been some horrible suffering. There are some extremely vulnerable populations around the world, including here in Canada, and the poverty traps that we already see will only be magnified as the consequences of climate change ensue. Some of the redeeming features of climate change are really that climate change represents an opportunity to basically rethink the way we're structuring our economic and our social and our political systems, and it's an opportunity for citizen engagement in higher level decision making about how we want to structure our cities and how we want to value different aspects of our quality of life.
Well, let me just put this on the table as well, Deborah. We had this program on the road in North Bay, Ontario, which admittedly is not as far north as Edmonton, but it's the near north in Ontario. And we were there this past weekend, and we asked people this question, and they said, slightly higher temperatures in North Bay, Ontario, allowing for a longer growing season agriculturally would not be a terrible thing. Is that a fair point?
Yes and no. If you're counting on average years to happen the majority of time, then yeah, we will have slightly longer seasons and slightly warmer temperatures. But it's really the climate variability that matters the most to farmers and to the rest of us. And it's the climate variability that is going to increase at least as fast as those increasing temperatures and lengthening growing seasons. And so it's about your access to water supply on a given year. It's about the exposure to new pests and pathogens. It's about basically the fact that weed species, for example, are even more responsive to warming temperatures than some of our crop species. And these are the things that farmers, for example, are going to have to contend with. And you can make the exact same argument in terms of the rest of us who live in cities. The fact that, sure, a couple of degrees warmer in the winter would be pleasant, but it's climate variability that's really affecting us now. It's not those global average trends that are affecting us. And so it's the increase in extreme weather activity, and not only including extreme storms, but also extreme heat events, which are a particular concern for people living in cities. But also the fact that climate variability also just simply means temperature variability. So this year, across the North American continent, we've experienced extremely and unusually cold temperatures throughout the winter. And so I don't think that one can count on climate change offering us milder climates as sort of a general rule. Okay, fair enough. Julia Langer, let's try this. The report talks about evidence already that we are starting to think about adaptation as opposed to mitigation, as opposed to reducing the bad behavior that causes climate change in the first place. We are starting to think about how do we adapt to this. What are the signs that you see that suggest adaptation is where it's at now?
Well, first of all, I would just say, and the reports confirm, that we cannot adapt to unmitigated climate change. So the pace of change and the magnitude would be so great that it would be impossible no matter how hard we try. But if we actually mitigate and recognize that there will be change and that we will have to adapt to it, then I think we have a hope.
And when you say mitigate, you mean?
Mitigate is reduce emissions, because without reducing emissions, it's going to be out of control, and we will not be adapting to that. We will be frying and flooding, et cetera. So here's where I think there's some interesting sweet spots between mitigation and adaptation. It's about avoiding heat risk. It's about making sure that we do have food supplies. It's about water and infrastructure risk. And the solutions come to that through energy efficiency. So less demand for energy, which is both a mitigation and an adaptation, because we won't be so reliant on big energy plants. Using distributed energy systems in our cities so that we have more self-reliance and probably cleaner energy. Looking at permeable infrastructure, which cools the cities and allows water to permeate rather than flood and damage. So I think the really interesting solution, and as Deborah was saying, is really finding those intersections between adaptation and mitigation, where we get the biggest bang for our buck, where we get co-benefits. And the IPCC report had a lot this time about how addressing climate change and adapting has many co-benefits for health, for the economy, for comfort in our buildings.
Well, speaking of health, I presume you welcomed the news the other day that Ontario is now officially off coal.
You know,
we don't make coal anymore.
No,
coal-fired power.
I just actually received an award from the Ontario Clean Energy Alliance on behalf of TAF, because we were the first and biggest funder of that campaign, because we follow the carbon. And that is the biggest reduction. And it's a perfect example of how mitigation is actually contributing to addressing this problem. And look at the proliferation of clean energy in this province and the opportunity for energy efficiency. That's where we're going to get both sides of the equation in dealing with climate change.
Is it possible, though, Deborah, to actually climate-proof our cities and towns?
There's no such thing as climate proof, but decision makers need to be thinking more in terms of climate resilience. And that means basically reducing exposure wherever we can, and there's a lot we can do in those areas. But when the reduction of actual exposure is not possible, then we really need to look at ways to build our adaptive capacity, reduce our vulnerability to those kinds of events. Heat waves are going to happen no matter what, but we can do a whole heck of a lot to basically heat-proof our buildings and ensure that we've got some emergency response plans for those who are most vulnerable to those heat events, just to take one example.
And I don't have to tell the two of you that long-range forecasts, which at the front end are very dire, but then at the back end have to be reevaluated because new information's come forward, doesn't help the cause, right? Is that, I mean, Deborah, let me get you to follow up on that first. The Himalayan glaciers, which initially were I guess forecast in 2007 to be melted away entirely by 2035, and then new information came forward. You had to revise the prediction. Is there a hazard in making these kinds of long-range forecasts, I guess is the question.
I would say yes and no. First of all, I think it needs to be pointed out that even for that earlier report, the AR4, the fact that so few errors were found in a report that was thousands of pages long really speaks to the integrity of that report and its authors. And I think one can say the exact same thing for the current report. But I think the point is, anytime you try to project anything with accuracy into the future, there is obviously a danger that figure is going to be wrong, which is why most climate projections refer to ranges of possible scenarios, and we often pick the median within those scenarios to sort of consider for planning. But all in all, I think the evidence that has accumulated over not just the last 7 years, which has been remarkable, but the last 20 years of climate science is the evidence is pretty irrefutable, and it points in one direction and one direction only. And the minor corrections that we've seen along the way are really just signs of improvements in climate science and in our projection abilities. Okay, Julia, though, do you get to the point where you think you run into people who say this just feels too big for little old me to do anything about? Well, you know, really, there's no one thing and no one person that can deal with it. So, you know, I like to refer to the Al Gore's thing about, you know, there is no magic bullet, there's only magic buckshot, which means that we're going to have to do a whole lot of things all at once because of the nature of this problem. And you know, I think that the confidence levels that are stated in the IPCC report just have been getting stronger and stronger, and they're very clear about where there's low confidence or high confidence. One of the things that is interesting is looking at the cost. And some of the Lord Stern report and TD Economics report that came out a couple of days ago showing just that cost of inaction. So it's just like if the IPCC weren't saying, let's look ahead, notwithstanding that we can't be absolutely sure about the future. Mm-hmm. If economists don't do that as well, then we're in big trouble because we're completely in the dark about what it might be costing us in the future. And I think that's starting to come home to roost, like the cost of inaction
is so big.
But media tend not to cover that. Media tend to cover the cost of action, which is $100 billion according to the last report.
Well, but you get value from that, because if you realize from the scientists that we're going to have all these impacts, if you didn't spend that money, then you're going to have to spend it now or spend it later. That's where we need the economists to get into the game. And the flip side of that is, where are the opportunities? And as an investor ourselves at Toronto Atmospheric Fund, we're finding that there is a huge burgeoning low carbon economy happening. And that, again, that's one of the interesting sweet spots, because here's an opportunity to one would hope not put $1.4 billion of Canadian dollars of subsidies into fossil fuels, and to start moving the money into low carbon opportunities. People can make money in clean energy, in energy efficiency, and be helping with this problem that we all have a role in.
Deborah, let me read you something that was in the New York Times just the other day. It says, some developing countries insisted on stripping charts from the third IPCC report's executive summary that could have been read as requiring greater effort from them, while rich countries struck out language that might have been seen as implying they need to write big checks to the developing countries. Both points survived in the full version of the report, but were deleted from a synopsis meant to inform the world's top political leaders. And I guess my question to you, having been inside the tent on this thing, was, did the Canadian government ask you for any changes to the policymakers' summary?
Well, first of all, let's start with what was reported in the New York Times. I think those statements are really very gross misinterpretations of the actual dialogues that took place in the plenary in Yokohama, and I would say that across the board, all of the delegates there and all of the scientists were in agreement about the seriousness of climate change and the need to adapt, first and foremost. And that was probably the most heartening thing that I took away from that experience. But yes, a number of changes were made in response to that dialogue, and that's the whole purpose of a plenary. The Canadian government in particular, we had a number of conversations about what we understood to be the key risks that North America is facing. But in general, I would consider it a very constructive and positive dialogue, and I would not characterize that dialogue as an effort to downplay the key messages in the report, or to try to renege on responsibilities in regards to adaptation.
Okay, but who wanted the price tag out? Because the $100 billion price tag was in and then it was out. Somebody wanted it out.
The concern about the $100 billion price tag really goes back to a conversation we were just having minutes ago, and that is the accuracy of projections and how dangerous that is when you actually put a dollar figure, much less a temperature figure, on a future projection. And so it really wasn't about attempting to avoid responsibility for paying for adaptation. It was concern with making such a precise estimate of the costs and the sort of the political implications of putting something like that in a report that has such influence as this.
I see. Julia, what is Canada's reputation in the international science world?
I operate more in the policy realm than in the science realm, but I think Canada's scientific community is very highly respected internationally in terms of the on-the-ground science, some of the work in the Arctic, the Great Lakes, freshwater ecosystems. So we have our eyes wide open about what is going on, and some very strong scientists and scientific data to add to the conversation and to things like the IPCC report. I think on the other hand, on policy, there has been numerous commentators about why is Canada not stepping up the way it should be and the way it did maybe 20 years ago on some of the environmental initiatives. I mean, Canada, Montreal Protocol, is sort of one of the high points of international participation in environmental conventions. So withdrawing from the Kyoto Protocol didn't do much for that reputation, and but there's always an opportunity to redeem, right? So we've got another UN convention opportunity coming up in Peru and Paris. The opportunities really have to be there to respond. And so maybe the conversation and maybe this is very strategic of IPCC, I wasn't at the table, Deborah has a lot more role in that, has been to try to bring together the mitigation and adaptation, put it in a more functional role of, spend it now or spend it later, look at the solutions and the co-benefits, and try to engage more countries in that conversation, and then the action on the ground.
Well, Deborah, I guess I'd follow up by saying, do our scientists in Canada have a problem when they're discussing these matters on the international stage, when they have to deal with the fact that it feels like much of the country is very gung-ho to develop, for example, the oil sands, et cetera?
I would say no. I think, as Julia said, our scientists are very highly respected. We have collaborations with other researchers all over the world, and we are all equally motivated to address the very serious problems that climate change poses. I think the political conversations in regards to Canada's role in international efforts to mitigate climate change are really happening in other arenas. The scientists are really getting together and collaborating on the science, rather than talking about their respective countries' political positions on the issue.
Okay, with a few minutes to go here, I want to put one more thing on the table, and that is, you mentioned the Montreal Protocol. Was that Stéphane Dion who got that together?
Oh no, that was well before. It was Tom McMillan. He was the minister at the time.
Tom McMillan. Yeah. So this is the Mulroney government.
That's right.
This is going way back.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. That was a poor attempt at a segue to bring up Stéphane Dion's name here, because in the 2008 election, of course, a lot of people remember he ran on this so-called green shift, where we're going to change the way we tax people, tax bad behavior, reward good behavior as it relates to the environment. And of course, the Liberals got thrashed in that election under his leadership. And the conventional wisdom that a lot of people took from that election is, if you want to campaign on green issues, you're going to get your hat handed to you. Is that the right lesson to take?
Well, I don't believe it's a third rail, the way people sort of relate to it. But nevertheless, I turn it on its head, and I say, it's all about energy efficiency. Don't we want our energy productivity to be better? Don't we want to be ahead of the curve in terms of where we're going with clean energy? The cost of solar is going down, wind power, cogeneration, et cetera, et cetera. So the new economy, the new low carbon economy that hits the mitigation and adaptation points is where we want to be. There's money.
When you say we, who's the we? Because I hear from rural Ontario all the time that they don't want any part of wind.
Well, okay, so wind in some places, maybe solar. Wind doesn't work in the city either, so we don't have to quibble about all the details, but you read the IPCC reports, and they're talking about a massive shift of capital from fossil fuels. You can't burn fossil fuels without making carbon dioxide. It's not possible. And moving that into a low carbon economy, in energy, in transportation fuels, in our buildings, in our industries, that is sort of the future. That is the new opportunity in the new economy. And I think that is where we as Canadians should be looking to be, not subsidizing fossil fuels. It will not happen overnight. We know that. But unless you have a plan, and I think that's the really most distressing thing, is that we don't necessarily have a cohesive plan.
Okay, forgive
Toronto
me.
does.
I want to jump in because I want to save. I got to save the last 30 seconds here for Deborah. Deborah, again, from that 2008 election, is the lesson that anybody who wants to run on the environment, it's hopeless?
I think it's a new day. It's 2014, and so much has happened since 2008, including British Columbia passing a carbon tax that far surpassed the wildest expectations of what it could achieve in terms of a reduction in emissions. We have Ontario taking the lead in support for its renewable electricity industry, and we have repeated social survey research which indicates strong support for climate change mitigation efforts at the national level, and we have a number of municipalities across the country that have basically gave up waiting for federal guidance and have taken things into their own hands. So I think there's a groundswell of support here, and the politics is on the side of climate change mitigation today.
We shall keep watching. Thanks to the both of you for coming in tonight and helping us out with this. Deborah Davidson from the University of Alberta in Edmonton, Julia Langer from the Toronto Atmospheric Fund here in Toronto. Thanks so much.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.